Okay. Emily, so I was looking everywhere on the internet for a video, something, anything that you would, I don't know, be interested in watching or want to watch, and nothing. Not a damn thing. I can't see any of those videos and even begin to think that you would care about them. So, figured I'd make my own. For this video, we're going to go over three basic things, just understanding your camera. And so that you know how it works, but also so that you know what it takes to kind of get the picture that you want within certain situations. So to help me, I have Percival. There we go. My ever steadfast penguin companion. And we'll be demonstrating just a few of these principles in action. So the first thing that you need to understand is it's this little button here. It says on off. So step one, turn on your camera. Now, first thing that you always do before you go out and you take pictures is A, make sure the battery's in there, and B, make sure you have a memory card in there, because if you go out and you're like, I'm gonna go on this adventure, but you have a dead battery and you have no pictures that you can take in your camera, there's no point. You're just lugging something around. So always turn on your camera first before you go out to make sure the battery's good and that you have decent, enough space at least for you to be able to take pictures. So there are three basic things that you need to understand when it comes to photography, and at least beginning to understand photography. And this is just, making sure that you get your exposure right, but also making sure that you're taking the pictures that you want in a way that you want. Now, of course, you can absolutely set your camera to an auto mode P for I think it's for program, where it's just programmed to do kind of change the settings so that everything kind of equals out. But if you're doing that, you're not really understanding why you'd be getting the pictures that you'd be getting. So we're going to run through some of the basics. For this, I'm going to turn the camera to M. It's manual mode. And manual mode lets you control those three things. Now, the three things are ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Brief rundown is ISO controls the light that your camera is able. Actually, all three really control the light. ISO would be if you're in a dark room and you like everything, you like how much, what your shutter speed or what your aperture is at, but you only want to raise the light, well, you change the ISO. Now we'll go over the three things, and you'll be able to understand. Them in full. Well, hopefully more in full than you have been. So the first thing, ISO. Now what we're going to do, and you won't quite understand this yet, is that we're going to take I don't know if you can hear that. Bear decided this moment to drink water, so I guess maybe I'll try to talk over him. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to take the aperture and the shutter speed, we're going to have them remain a constant, but I'm going to change the ISO so that you can see. Now on your camera, and I'll show you a little picture right here. On your camera, you'll have these three different things. So you have the shutter speed, the 50, 2.8, which is the f-stop, and 640 right now, which is the ISO. For the purpose of this, I'm going to go ahead and leave the shutter speed at 50th of a second and the aperture at 2.8, and then we're going to have the ISO at 200. Okay, so first of all, the ever diligent model. I'll go ahead and take a picture with these settings. 50 shutter speed, f2.8. Usually aperture is referred to as an f-stop. So you'd say f2.8, or if it was high, you know, if it was a little more closed, you'd say f4, f5.6, f8, so on. So 50th, 1/50th of a second. F-stop is at 2.8 and 200 ISO. We'll go ahead and take a picture. Now, in this light, and this is pretty dimly lit, we only have really 2 lights going. We have on the side, I have 2 lamps. So it's pretty dark. Now, again, to combat this, what we can do is turn up that ISO. So I'll turn it to 400. Now, keeping those other 2 settings the same, those haven't changed. Only thing I'm changing is the ISO. What's better? It's, you know, it's much brighter in comparison to the 2. So I'll go ahead, now I'm going to change it to 640. 640 is pretty good. We're starting to get there. You're starting to be able to see a little bit more of the detail. The blacks are coming up, and you're able to see, again, more of the detail in that black. So let's go to 800. And then I'll go ahead and just move this to 1000, 1250, and I'll stop at 1600. So 800 is starting to look good. 1000 getting better. 1250, you're almost there. 1600. 1600 is good as far as the amount of light that you've been able to capture, the amount of the exposure, as it were. Now, you have 1/50th, 2.8, 1600. We found a good match. Now, say Percival was moving, so let's try a little bit of this with that 1/50th of a second. I took 3 pictures. I'm only going to show you one, but that's a good example of movement. Now we've got, I'll go ahead and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the shutter speed. So we're at 1/50th of a second. Now if I drop that down to, say, a 25th of a second, and I take a picture at ISO 1600, again, you've already compensated for the light with a 1600 ISO, but because you're dropping the shutter speed down, you're actually letting in more light. So this is going to get a lot brighter. And I'll take a standing picture of Percival for a second. You see how much brighter 1600, 1/25th of a second it is in comparison to the 1/50th. And it's a big, you know, it's a pretty big jump. Go on, go. Okay, dog break. Okay, so as you can see, again, much lighter, much lighter. We've kept the 1600 ISO, you know, the constant. Now let's see what happens when we play with the shutter speed a little bit. So again, we went from 50th to 25th. Now I'm going to drop it a little bit lower. We'll put it at 1/10th of a second. You'll see again how much brighter this will get from 1/25th. Now, just to say, you know, this is beyond what I would use. You know, this is starting what's called a blown out highlight, where you're not seeing detail in those whites, and you can kind of see on the right hand side of Percival it's really getting blown out. So we'll drop it down again, and we'll put it to 1/5 of a second, and then we'll do 1/3 of a second, and then I'll do 1 whole second. Try that again. All right, and 1 whole second. Okay, so at a whole second, I mean, that is blown out. So you're letting in tons of light. Now again, so say you wanted to leave it open for 1 whole second. What you could do to fix that is change the ISO, bring it down. So maybe bring that ISO, which again is sort of what's going on in the room that you're in, bring that down to a 400 ISO. And I'll take a picture of him at 400. Probably still going to be pretty bright. Let's do one more just to make sure. Take a look. Yeah, it's still bright, but you're starting to see a difference. So let's bring that down to 200. Now 200 again is still too bright. We'll go to 100. And 100 is just right at that level where it's a little too bright. You might be able to fix it in the post-processing, using something like Lightroom or Photoshop to bring that back down. But you're getting closer. So, okay, we're getting closer at 100 ISO. We're shooting it for a second. Well, there's still a little bit of tweaking we could do in camera so that we don't have to do it after camera. We'll make the shutter speed go faster. So we're 1 full second. Let's bring it up to half a second. Now we'll bring it up to 1/3 of a second. Now I'll bring it up to we'll do 1/5 of a second. And then 1/10, 25th, and back to 1/50th. Now again, I'm still taking a picture at 1/50th of a second, but I have changed it I've changed the ISO. I've changed the ISO from 100. I'll just do a quick demonstration of 100 at 1/50th of a second at f2.8, or the aperture at 2.8. And now I'll do it at 1600 with those other two settings the exact same, but the only thing I'm changing is that ISO. And as you can see, that's a big difference between those two. One, you can barely see anything. The other one is pretty spot on to how you'd want it. Nothing is too blown out. Nothing is too whatever. So the downside to turning up your ISO, you're like, okay, of course, I can take a picture at that ISO high. Everything looks appropriately exposed. Nothing is pushed too far, pulled too deep, that you couldn't bring it back with a little bit of editing. Well, if you turn up ISO, you can again make it brighter, but the higher the ISO, the more grain there is. Now, the way that the grain is dealt with digitally is, think of ISO as pixels, pixel count, or pixel size, maybe a little bit better. So the bigger the pixel, the more grainy it's going to be. So in a darker setting like this, if I'm raising the ISO, then yeah, I can see more, but I'm sacrificing the quality of the image, the sharpness of the image. So let's go ahead. I'm going to bump up the ISO to 2000 from 1600. And you'll see it's going to get brighter, but it's going to be a little bit less quality. Now from 2000, I'm going to go 2500. Then I'm going to go to 3200. And then we'll go to 4000, 5000, 6400. Now 6400, we're reaching that point where it's just starting to get blown out. It's not where you wanted to go. If you wanted to compensate, of course, you could bring this down to, maybe we'll do 1/60th of a second. That might be decent. And yeah, that's about right. And you've compensated. So you boost the ISO, and that makes it so you can have that higher shutter speed. So again, sorry for kind of going back and forth on this. With the 6400, if I'm going at 1/50th of a second and I'm moving Percival around, he's going to have a lot of motion. If I'm at 6400th versus 1600 and I am taking a picture at that 160th of a second, there's going to be a lot less motion blur. You're not going to see him moving around. So say you're in Hawaii, you're going to see waterfalls. You want to take a picture of something. Well, you turn up that shutter speed and you're going to stop the movement. It's going to be, you're going to be able to see each individual water droplet as it's falling down. So if you were to take a picture at 1/4000th of a second, you would, it would look, there's that one water droplet. You're outside, you're in the direct sun, we'll get there. But anyway, so the next thing, so we've gone over ISO. Again, it controls sort of the light in the room, film, and quality of the picture you're taking. The lower of that number, the better quality it's going to be. 100 for the camera you'll be using, 100 to 640 is probably the range that you would want to stay in with maximum, being able to kind of get the best out of that camera. You can't push it to 800; those are absolutely usable. 1000 is fine. 1600 if you need it. And when I would use 1600 with that camera, it's more, I want to get a picture. I can probably correct a little bit of it, not get it to that perfect exposure, but I can correct enough of it where it'll still look good enough. Now you can set that camera up so that it's you can do what's called an extended ISO range, so that it can go to 3200 or 6400. And once you get to that point, you're really starting to get a lot of grain. So here I'll do one for, and 6400 is that camera's max. I'll push this camera to its max, so that you can kind of see what happens when you like what happens to the quality of the picture. So I'll do one at the 1/60th at ISO 6400, and then take a picture. Now I'll do ISO, this one pushes the max at 25,600 I think, and compensate by doing this at 1/500th of a second. Now looking at the difference between those two, if we zoom in and you're looking, let's see, let me pick a spot up here. Looking at those differences, you can very easily tell the quality. There's even some change in the color. It's not accurate. But if you needed it, and if you are in a dark area and you absolutely want to take a picture, it would be appropriate to turn it up that high so that at least you can get a picture. It's not one picture. A picture is better than no picture at all. Okay, so now we've gotten to aperture. For this, I don't want you to think about the shutter speed. I don't want you to think about the ISO. We're just going to talk about how aperture affects the photo first. So right now I have, I'll go ahead and I'm going to change this to aperture priority. Now what aperture is it is how much light the camera takes in, but it also changes what is called the depth of field. Now depth of field is, so from me to Percival, there's a certain range, and how much of Percival is in focus and the background is in focus is depth of field. So you have, so for instance, at a lower f-stop, at that lower aperture range, like f2.8, there may be, from the nose to mostly almost to the back. A good easy way to think about it is the lower the ISO, the less people, if you were to have them lined up, would be in focus. So for instance, say you had an aperture or an f-stop of f1, you'd have one person in focus. You have an aperture of 4, you'd have 4 people in focus. 16, you'd have 16 people in focus. Long range, long depth of field, versus that short, f1, which is really shallow, or as the lens that you'll be using, which is f2.8, which is still pretty shallow. So I'll go ahead and I'll take a picture using this, and this is going to be at f2.8. The camera's going to automatically figure out where the exposure should be. So the camera's telling me that I should be taking a picture at, let's see, we'll do it at ISO 1600, since that's where we were before. Camera's taking a picture at 1/50th of a second. This will give us the most proper exposure. Now that is at f2.8. Now I want you to, I'll take a little bit of a better one so you can see what I mean by this. So what you can see in the background is, yes, Percival is in focus, a little blurry because my hand was shaking. I'll try this one more time. Percival is in focus, but the background is not. Background is blurred. And you can even see in the top right hand corner there's these little balls. Those balls that are out of focus, it's comes off of light. That's called bokeh, or like a bouquet. It's an easy way to think of it, like a bouquet of flowers. It's B-O-K-E-H. And a lot of times in movies you'll see this used. I think Lost in Translation has just oodles of it at the beginning. But anyway, it's what happens when you make things in the background become out of focus. So at f2.8, that's what that picture takes like. Now that's what that picture looks like. Now that was at 1/50th of a second. So by changing the f-stop to, say we'll go to 3.5, and I'll take the same picture, or try to take the same picture. And now it's telling me that 40th of a second is the best exposure. Now I'll just keep going through this. We'll go to f5, and it's telling me that 20th of a second. We'll go to f7.1. That's a 10th. f8, which is 1/8 of a second. f10, And finally, f16. This is 1/5 of a second for the proper exposure. Oh, took 2 there. So the important thing to notice is as you're at, as you're changing your aperture, f2.8, let's take a look at that background again. Nothing's in focus. But as that number slowly gets higher and it's closing off, more is coming into focus. f8, you can kind of see the background. f16, you can almost read the titles on the book. But still, Percival is in focus. So you have things that are in the foreground in focus and things that are in the background in focus. Now this particular lens only goes to f16. You can, with the lens that I'm giving you, it goes up to f22, so that would be a little bit more range. Probably you would be able to see those titles very clearly and Percival in focus. Each camera also will have its own special range, or each lens has its own range where things will be the most in focus. So for this lens, really you could stop it at about f4 and you would get the maximum sharpness versus the lens you'll be using where it is the maximum sharpness, I believe, is f8 or an aperture of 8. And then whatever you're taking a picture of, you're going to be, that's the sharpest that will get. Anything either direction, you'll get a little bit more of what's called making the image soft. So now you've got the ISO, which is sort of grain, but also the light. You've got the shutter speed, which is movement. So the lower the shutter speed, the more movement you're allowing. The higher the shutter speed, the more movement you're restricting. And again, light. And then you have the aperture, which also affects light. So I'm going to move this back to manual. We'll go to 1/50th of a second. I'll go at aperture 2.8, and I'll go at 1600 ISO. Now again, this is going to affect that depth of field, but it also affects the light. So I'll go ahead and take a picture at f2.8, and then I'll go ahead and move this. Move that to the 3.5 and to 5, and then we'll go to 7.1, go to 8, go to 11, and go to 16. I mean, you can just see it, you can just really see it drop off, 2.8, 3.5, 5, 7, 8, 11, 16. Now, so say you want to take a picture at that f16 and you're in this dark room and you are, you don't want, you want that background to be in focus, you want Percival to be in focus. Well, what would you do if you were 1/50th of a second you wanted to stay? You change your ISO. So you bring the ISO up, and that's going to give you that more range. You're going to be able to see more. Now I've gone from 1600, we'll go to 4000. We'll try that. Now from there, we're going to go to 6400, and just so I can show you, the 25,000. So 1/50th of a second at f16, you're not seeing much at 1600, much of anything. 4000, you can kind of see a little bit of Percival. 6400, I mean, barely. But 25,600, it's, you can see it. You can see what's going on. Now let's zoom in again, and we'll take a real good look at that grain. It looks like crap, absolute crap. Yeah, I mean, that's what the higher ISO really does. This is probably the best explanation of what you can see, what happens. So that's how aperture controls light. Now we'll go ahead and I'm going to turn this to ISO back to 1600. We'll leave the shutter speed at 50, and I'm going to change the f-stop, the aperture, to 2.8. Now say again, if there's something I want to do, if I want to take a picture of just Percival, I'm going to have my aperture at 2.8. You're taking a picture of a person, you want to have it at a decently low level, unless you really want the background in focus. So say you were taking a picture of your brother, and you're in the direct sunlight and you want to see the background. Go ahead, move it to f16, or move it to f12. and you'll be able to see him and the background in focus. In fact, in the direct sun of Hawaii, where it'll just be super bright all the time, is you won't have a problem having to worry about bumping up your ISO. With a ton of light, you could probably keep your ISO around 400 at f16 and still have a good shutter speed. You probably have 200th of a second, 100th of a second, and that's not a problem. Maybe even higher than that. If you want to get the best sharpness of that, you bring it down to say the aperture of f8, and then you've gotten double of what. So you could do 300, 400 shutter speed and still keep it at that low ISO, best quality. You'd be able to get the best and still have the image that you want. If you're taking a picture of the background, realistically, you could probably, if it's or not the background, but of the scenery, you could drop your aperture down as low as you want. Because everything after a certain point is really just going to be in focus. The foreground won't be in focus. So if your brother was standing there and you're focusing on the background, you take a picture at f2.8, he's going to be blurry, super blurry. But the background will not be. And if you're just taking a picture of the scenery, that's probably okay. And as the sun starts to set, the light gets a little bit worse. It's okay to leave it down like that, and you'll be able to sort of get the best out of your picture. If you want to see more of the scenery, if you have a sweeping landscape, bring the aperture up, let it see a little bit more, and then you'll be able to capture more of the scene. Again, in Hawaii, pretty bright a lot of the time, so I'm sure you'll be doing fine. Okay, so let's run over these basic principles one more time just to sort of reiterate. You have ISO, which controls the light in the room, but it also controls the grain. It's a give and take. The higher the ISO, the more grain you get, but the more you can see in the dark. Shutter speed. Shutter speed controls movement. It controls the light. It controls the stopping power that you have. You can stop things in motion. Aperture controls depth of field. So being able to see from A to B, and basically where you're moving B, you're moving that focus back so that you can see more within that range. And then, just using those things in conjunction. So you have your ISO and you have your shutter speed where you want it, but it's a little bit too bright, bring down your ISO. If you have your shutter speed where you want it and you have your ISO where you want it, but it's a little too bright, turn up your aperture and you're going to increase the range, but you can also drop the light that way. You have your ISO where you want it, you have your depth of field where you want it, it's a little too bright, turn up your shutter speed, and it will drop down that light and stop that motion. If you want to, if you wanted to let the motion, so say you're taking a picture of like a river or a waterfall, and you want it to be a really low shutter speed, so it looks like milky waterfall. You can turn down your ISO, you can crank up the aperture, and turn down your shutter speed, and you can keep it open for as long as you can while still making a good exposure, and it'll actually have a pretty cool result.